and welcome to the third episode of the CTO Fundamentals 2 series. I'm Sorin, and I lead the engineering team at Bunishal. And together with me is Cornel, Chief Platform Officer at Pentalog. Just to add some context, Bunishal builds SaaS platforms for managing environments. We're focused on improving both the productivity and the developer experience for software engineers. And Pentalog provides top quality talent and know-how to support business launch or extend digital teams. Today, we'll be talking about the legacy of the technical leader, both the one you inherit, but we'll focus more on the one you leave behind. For today's webinar, we will have a presentation in which Cornel will walk you through the decision-making and everything else that's related to you leaving a good legacy behind, a successful legacy. We'll see how this measures too. And then we'll have a Q&A section in which we will take your questions and we will answer them. You can ask the questions at any time during the webinar, but we will tackle them in the end after the presentation is finished. So, Cornel, the stage is yours.
Thank you for this introduction. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm very happy we do this again, a new episode. This is the second series of second season of CTO Fundamentals, third episode, as you said, Sorin. So just for you to know, I'm getting back after COVID. So if I kind of have trouble a bit when speaking, I'm sorry for that. I hope it will be good enough for this session. And as every session, every episode starts, we are going to focus on Bob. And Bob is our character, and there will be slides with blue areas with where we have the highlight, the topic of the slide. And of course, there is a story that I hope you will follow it from slide to slide until the end. For those who are not used and haven't seen the previous episodes, they are recorded, they are available online, so you can watch them later. I recall some of the aspects from the previous sessions. As you will see, I will start with what happened in the last episode, the CTO decision making. So yeah, focus on the characters and the story of the slides. We are starting, and this is where we've left the last time. CTO decision making. That was the last slide that we had with the highlights of the session. And we had things like it was important to measure the cycle time of decision making. There's no silver bullet. Lots of interesting stuff. So if you want to watch that episode again, for us, what matters here is the decision log, one of the items that we will find in the legacy. So this is one of the things we will talk again and again, and not just this episode, in many episodes this will follow. So decision log that we've talked in previous episodes is part of the CTO legacy, and we are going to get back to that. And also from another previous episode from the season 1, A Better CTO, we had this conclusion where Bob built his ideal definition of a CTO, where he had these priorities, highest, and we said the highest are things that we always apply, and medium only things that are contextual. And from this conclusion, it was very important to recall that Bob discovered that his job needs to be auditable and transferable. And there was this conclusion of this sample of what does it mean? My job as a CTO is transferable. There was a definition of CTO transfer, and this was a sample. Like Bob at that time said, I'm looking at an horizon of 4 years, and I will leave behind a catalog of data. I will leave behind an evolutive architecture which is updated, documented, and so forth, a decision ledger, So this is a sample. Of course, this is contextual and it needs to make sense for the CTO. So this is an important part, the cornerstone of a legacy, of things that we leave behind. And I'm starting with it because that's not enough. So this is an example of what we can propose for ourselves. And of course, this kind of definition can change. That's fine. Not having one, that can be harmful for your success as a CTO in that company. And we'll see I hope, in a few minutes why. Um, so, um, just to recall, Bob was testing this definition and how that transfer would look like from time to time. And the angle chosen to start this episode is the story from Intel leadership, the executive officer and the CTO, who are in this crisis with the memory chips, and they fired themselves. That's the key idea here. They fired themselves. Because they fired themselves, they said, what would the next generation of executive officer, for example, would do in our place? And they said that they would close the facilities. And this is what they did. So they fired themselves in order to not be fired, but take the right decisions now. So that's the angle we are going to choose. Bob is with his coach. The coach asks, what happens if you don't come tomorrow at work? And Bob says, I can't easily tell. And the coach proposes a workshop, a small set of questions for Bob to answer. It has a situation, an assumption, and yeah, please, you can. There is a survey. There are 4 questions that Bob will answer. I'm going to present each question, and you can also answer to these questions. We try to always collect when you talk about CTO legacy. It's not the first time we talk about CTO legacy, not in this form, but in another form we've talked with many occasions. And we collect these questions with these answers, and we learn from you in the same time. So if you can answer, that would be helpful. Please do so. So there is this situation. You have an unfortunate accident and you cannot continue to go to job. What happens with the organization? It's a key question because we say as a CTO organization, it matters and so forth. Question 1. How long do you think it will take for someone else to take over your role and the associated responsibilities? Of course, in the company you work today, where you have the accident and you cannot go to work tomorrow. That's the first question. The second question is, 4 years from now on, an employer is going to look for you and try to employ you and is going to ask the leadership that you quit today because of the accident, the executive management, what do they recall about yourself? And the idea is, how would an average answer look like? So I don't recall much. You need to recruit. Of course, there is other with an open question, and we'll see what Bob answers. The third question is the same, but it's for the team, for people who report to Bob. And the fourth question is very related to the legacy. How does it work? How did it work? The handover, the new CTO took over from product perspective. How was it built? From data management. Key questions like, was it easy to find the underlying systems and processes, or you need to mine all that? Things like total cost of ownership, is that fine? Is that well managed? Ledger of technology decisions. And the list is not exhaustive. And the key question here is, when you look from that perspective, what is the new person going to say? Is she going to say something like, wow, I have a strong foundation I can build upon, or this is a sinking mess, or something else, or other, or something in between? And Bob answers like this. First, he feels like the new person, it will take between 1 and 3 months to take over the role with full responsibilities, which is in average how we transfer all the CTO jobs, by the way. So this is not something exceptional. We usually expect to have a transfer of 3 months when we do that. Then, the second question, Bob answers something very interesting. He says that as the executive leadership would answer, he imagines this. We were on the right path, but he left us, of course, because of the accident. It was not intended. And we had to start all over again with someone new. So not very happy, not good memories from this perspective. When our business was acquired by the fund, Bob suffered a lot. Remember the CTO strategy episode. If you don't recall that, find it on the internet. You will find it. It's the fund acquires a company where Bob works as a CTO, and Bob kind of has lots of challenges, personal and with the fund and so forth. The story is there. So it took him some time to get back in business and contribute as we normally expect from a CTO. Third answer is Bob would say something like, I think the team would recommend me. This is very fast forward. Of course, they couldn't align on everything and there were debates, but quite positive from this perspective. And the last question is, when we look at different dimensions, what did the new person found? And Bob says something, he will say something in between, not a sinking mess, but not too far from that. And so this is very important. Why? Because he feels like there are too many moving pieces in the puzzle, in his enterprise architecture. The decision log is there, but still not functioning properly. Not everything important is there. Cost of ownership, it's interesting, but still not running as it should. There are difficult questions to answer. So there are still improvements to be done, and so forth. So yeah, please remember, write your questions in the chat. We will take them one by one after we run the episode. And Bob, with this in mind, he studies. He gets a recommendation from his coach. Finite and Infinite Games from James P. Cars. And the author says there are two kinds of games. Ones that are finite and others who are infinite. A finite game is played for the purpose of winning. An infinite game for the purpose of continuing the play. He pursues this path. He lands on a book from Simon Sinek, The Infinite Game. And he gets this definition, very simple one. Overall, business is an infinite game. Football is a finite game, has a clear goal, rules, clear outcome, and so forth. Business doesn't stop, at least a successful one. So Bob says, so he's taking some notes from all this. In order to have an infinite game, there needs to be some sort of sense of direction of the future. And sometimes that can be hard, difficult, because if you are a startup, you don't have a business model. So what kind of sense of the future is that? But he's not in a startup right now. He has a business model currently operating. He's in growth stage. So it should be fine to answer this. The CTO job is temporary, and there will be a new CTO. So these are the assumptions. He continues with his studies, and he lands on something very interesting: sustainability. And the definition here is sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. He finds this definition very sane, very healthy. In a sense, a sense of the future was lacking, at least 5 years kind of future. But they were always burning the entire energy of the company. And the runway was, in best case scenario, 9 months. And the runway is not necessarily the problem because they are a healthy business, at least for now. But they don't think about what they do right now and how that can harm the future generations. So new insights. He's taking this. He's taking notes. So he needs to balance somehow short term with long term. Of course, that's normal. But from a perspective like what are the things that on short term can harm the organization on long term? And in terms of clear direction, he recalls that on strategy, he's been through that. And the strategy clarifies many answers, many questions. For example, Lawrence Friedman said, strategy is all about having better positions towards a given direction. And he had this summary from the CTO strategy episode, where he learned that strategy is all about having better positioning, implies creating superior economic performance that fuels valuation. Strategy is about what makes you unique and is not going to make everyone happy. So this is very important for Bob to go further and build something that he calls a decision-making framework inspired from sustainability so that he leaves something behind. And he's looking at all his learnings. He recalls Loic Finaz, who says, we never take decisions from an ideal set of options. We usually take shortcuts and we have a direction and we take these shortcuts hoping that at one point in time we reach the destination. Or things like the Bataille des Alpes, the Battle of Alps in the Second World War, where Italy tried to attack France, but they didn't move the needle because Italy was not in the same league. And Bob recalls this very important question. Am I in the right league when I compete with others? What's reasonable? The key here is not the league necessary when he's playing. What's reasonable for our organization to work on? So he's getting back to his notes and he says, okay, we rarely solve problems. We replace them with others we would rather solve. We don't always understand in what league we are playing, but expectations should be reasonable and relative to decisions and the context. Here's an example, and he puts this in his decision-making framework, and he says this is an example of solution architecture that his team is going to use. And he says we are currently here in infrastructure as a service in what we have, but that's too expensive for us. It's not for our league. It gives us lots of flexibility, but we don't have the means to benefit from that flexibility. So we should move there. So he's building these policies in his decision-making framework. He's also looking at things that you've met in other episodes, like maturity models, and says we score the product in these axes. And we look, for example, in infrastructure and DevOps, starter, almost good, good, very good, and things like that. And Bob says, okay, it's fine for us, almost good, because that's what's reasonable for us, at least for the next 2 years. So this kind of rules is putting in his decision-making framework. He gets back to the first episode, which was the ideal CTO, where we said these are the most important responsibilities. Doesn't matter what kind of CTO flavor you have, what you do in a company, this is what matters most. This is contextual. Sometimes this is as important as this one, sometimes not. But Bob improved over that. His list is more rich right now. He's looking from different things, and he says, "Look, I'm going to have the CTO priorities also on 6 months, and I'm going to do with my executive management and say I'm going to focus here. So of course there will be periods when I focus there and there, but why I'm focusing 6 months here is because it's connected to my definition of what I want to leave behind in 4 years. So I will focus here because this is more important for the company, and this is what I'm also going to leave behind." And during the work with his coach, the coach is saying, "Yeah, but remember the last time when you had lots of challenges? That wasn't easy for you. So you've had trouble personal level and in the company. How are you going to take care of all that? And Bob is thinking very seriously about it, saying, in fact, what harmed me the most was the thing that I was looking at myself from a victim perspective when that happened. So, for those who are not aware, we have on our side something which is called CTO talks. So there are two tracks here. Those are the CTO fundamentals that you attend here, the second season, and CTO fundamentals is there is a vision of the CTO, the idealistic vision, and we iterate over it, we improve it, we evolve it, and because we learn from hundreds of CTOs each year. And then there is how people really implement this. And we invite CTOs and we ask them a set of questions in order to stress this vision. And again, with your questions that you can put here in the chat, you can stress the vision that we present. It's important for us. And there was the CTO talk where the CTO of Atom Bank was invited, and he said, don't underestimate the importance of your role as a leader of your business. It's a privilege to be a CTO, to be the CTO. Never underestimate the power and the difference you can make. And he continues. It's just at the end of the episode. So CTO is a privilege. So the first trap for Bob is whatever happens is to not see what he's doing as a privilege. And eventually, if he lands in this trap, he has a tool. He learned from it, from Christopher Avery, the responsibility process, which is sometimes we lay blame, we're in denial, we justify with shame, but at that moment, we don't see CTO as a privilege. That's the moment where things are happening because the fault of others and things like this. And this is very important to be careful on the thoughts we have and the way we think and the way we challenge others. So that we detect if we are still responsible as a CTO, not just for the team. Of course, the example here from the CTO tactics was another example where, but I'm not going to take it again as an example. You can see the video later. Another lesson for Bob, which is very important, also at the personal level when it comes to the CTO legacy, is that what helped him and the knowledge he has right now will not necessarily help him in what he needs to reach in 4 years. So what got you here won't get you there. And eventually, if you recall the CTO flavors that we had 4 CTO flavors. CTO as an infrastructure manager, CTO as a big thinker, CTO as a visionary, or CTO as an external facing technologist. We've split that for a while. Now we have 5. So we split the visionary with operations manager because we've learned from it. It's a flavor in itself. And just to recall why this is important, the big thinker as a CTO was the original CTO who was very strategy centric. For example, a CTO who's operating at this level might say, the product we work on, we need to shut it down. It's not working. We need another product or something else. The visionary CTO, for example, it's an expert in the product. Her power comes from the product and the technology. It's usually the first product owner or the first the developer, actually in many cases the first developer, and there is a catch with this flavor. Of course, this visionary is expert in the product, knows everything about it, but it would be very difficult for him or her to say we stop the product. The catch here is the CTO startup. CTO startup is a subset of the visionary. It's when the CTO has this constant feeling that he or she adapts slower than the organization does. When this is your feeling, the burnout or something very wrong is going to happen. It's a matter of time, because usually more people cannot adapt faster than one person. So you have this feeling something conceptually is very wrong, and you are taking too much on yourself, and there is something very problematic. Also, something very personal that's helping Bob here is games people play, and the lesson that's helping Bob here comes from the fact that Bob had reflexes when working with people, and there are these in society, because everything is social in what we do at work. There are reactions, and we are tested, challenged, and we play some games that don't always help us. In the current situation, Bob had someone who was mean to him, and he was frustrated. And the coach was asking, "Okay, but what was the reaction that person was expecting from you?" And Bob said, "It doesn't matter what, because she achieved exactly what she wanted as a reaction from me." And he started to learn from that. So there is a body of knowledge helping Bob on that. And Bob is wrapping this all together to finish his decision framework. And he says, in fact, there's also a personal decision framework. I need some sort of rules only for me, that where I practice how should I react, how should I solve some situations, so that the organization is not prevented from our personal frustrations, but we focus on our what need to progress on, and I'm also better. I'm not going to take it personal. Also, experience matters, but it might also hold me back. So this is a very key, important element in his legacy. And if Bob has signs of not being responsible, he knows how to get unstuck through these tools that we've seen right now. And Bob is going further again. He recalls that technology cannot be separated from social structures. They cannot be dissociated. And in order to leave something behind, he needs to think not at individuals, not at the technology in itself, but at the complex social technology system. And this is very important. I'm going to stick a bit on it because it's very important. Many people think, and when we interview CTOs, and we ask what they leave behind, they say, I will leave behind a team. But you can't leave behind the team. The team, it's not owned by you or by the company. The team can leave in a week, or you cannot, but the system, in a sense, you can observe it, you can ensure that from from various angles, it's in the right shape. So that's one aspect of it. The second aspect of it is um, even the greatest technology, if it's not used by the right people, even if it's there, it can be a waste. So we've seen many situations where features were built, systems were built, they were very interesting and not used. So this needs to be part of the legacy and the decision making that impacts the legacy. So we've been through most of the key aspects of the CTO legacy. And let's see how we compile all this together. So, and yeah, before compiling it together, the technical debt, there was something from the technical debt that was important. We also leave behind some debt. I hope nobody is surprised. In the session highlights from the first episode of this season, CTO and the technical debt, there were many things about how we should look at the technical debt, and the fact that we should look at it more from an enterprise architecture perspective, social technical debt, not just the software debt. We've seen CTOs that had took a very radical approach and said we stop there and we start a new system. I'm not going to say it's better or not, but the entire idea of the debt in those areas was erased. It needs to be social technical debt. This is what matters the most from a legacy perspective. So this is how we wrap it up. This is the infinite game. Your job as a CTO is temporary. There needs to be a sense of direction for the future. That's important. Clear direction is required. Not necessary for the very long term, but and that comes with the strategy. We need to take decisions without compromising the ability of future generations. So if the next CTO, when she arrives, let's say I cannot build with it, we've done a pretty poor job here. We didn't think of how someone else will leverage that and continue to work on it. There is a CTO transfer definition we've started. This is the first slide, and we've repeated it in many episodes. We had their data catalog, we had their decision log. Decision log, we cannot overstate the importance of that. And why the context is important. And for the new CTO, for the successor, the successor doesn't find some sort of roots of why we are there, she's going to be lost. He's going to be lost. And of course, decisions expire. Remember from our previous session. Reasonable expectations. So we had some samples of solution architecture guidelines. What's reasonable for us? Or for example, in terms of CTO priorities, in the 6 months, this is what's reasonable to focus on. For me as a CTO, my priorities. If we get stuck, you can get unstuck with using the responsibility process. Very important. It's not for nothing that we always talk, at least I'm talking a lot about the CTO startup subset of the CTO visionary, where these very capable, competent people are in a situation when they don't help the organization, they are less helpful for the organization, they harm the organization, and they harm themselves. So we should see it more like a privilege, what we do. We need a guideline in order to know how to react in difficult situations, no matter how good you are. And I know there are CTOs saying, I'm working by reflexes, by intuition. That doesn't exist. Even we have challenges, everyone, and that can be practiced. It's part of our emotional intelligence, and the good news. It's practiced. So the idea of having this framework is to practice, in a sense, simulate hard situations before happening, so that we better react in real situations. Experience matters, but it may also hold us back. So in your legacy, you might put things which might be irrelevant. You need to be more like a big thinker, think of a strategy and things that matter. And one of the things that matters here is when you choose the things that you put in your CTO transfer definition, think of the things that you will not regret in 5 years. And you will see there aren't that many. Centralized log, for example, you will not regret it. Using an identity and access management for your product, you will not regret it in the future, or there is little chance. Coding that, you will regret it. Yeah, and you leave behind some debt, but you should see it more like an enterprise social technical debt. So your debt will be some teams, a department that you left and you didn't structure. You should think of things that more like from a cultural aspect, what have you done? In the previous session, mindful about the time, in the previous session of decision making, you've seen that there are things we can do with immediate impact in from a cultural perspective. That's very important. So if you were there for years and cycle times are long, people are frustrated, the organization suffers when change needs to happen. There is an important chance, as a whole, you and the executive team did a poor job in terms of agility, at least. So your footprint on a culture matters a lot. And this is it. These are the things that matter in terms of legacy. And before going to the Q&A, let me show you something else. So we've run many polls in these regards. The key question was mostly the same. And yeah, you can also answer to this question. There is a survey for that. It's always helpful to see how others answer. Please do so. When I took over the role of my predecessor, I was positively impressed with what I found. We asked CTOs, and look at the distribution of answers. And this is the most positive set of answers that we had. And when we look at people who answered, there were many in agree that were not CTOs, in fact. So I don't know why. Some of the people who were on LinkedIn there, for example, answered, but they were marketing officer, revenue officer, and they answered more like agree and strongly agree. There were only 2 people who answered strongly agree, and usually there's none. I remember a meetup in Paris. It was called CTO Blind Spots. And in that meetup, with the CTO community from Paris, Tech Rocks, great community. And the same poll, different data, and some answered strongly agree, 2 CTOs. And I asked, please, we don't get that a lot. What did you find? How come you strongly agree? And they said, both of them, I strongly agree, because as a CTO, you shouldn't expect otherwise. It's a mess. It's usually a mess. It will continue to be a mess. We should be happy with that. So this is a very interesting insight because we've seen it with GDPR. We've seen it with in many situations where new regulation comes in, and there's a reason why new regulation comes in is because we've lost control over what we've done. We've lost control, or sometimes we are not even. Sometimes we can debate about the ethics of what we do, but mostly we've lost control. That's, I think, most of the situations. When we have 0 days on NASA satellites, and that's pretty expensive to correct because I know everyone used the Log4j for that reason. It's just an example. We can't say the president of NASA is his fault or her fault. I don't even know who that person is. There is some technology responsible for that, and some technology leadership who lost control there. And of course, it's difficult to to regain control. It's a journey for all of us, but it's a matter of time because we need to do this. It's a privilege to correct it. The entire economy is based on what we've done. And if we don't look at this as a privilege and we regain control, a new definition of control, of course, we'll just get more regulation, and we will frustrate others instead of serving them and bringing more value. So yeah, this is about CTO legacy. This was the session I wanted to share with you. And we go to the Q&A.
Great. It was really interesting to watch this story. Really captivating. I'm gonna go directly into the questions now. So, first one, um, how do you define a successful CTO legacy, and what are some key indicators of this success?
So I'd say whatever the legacy is, you tested it before, you somehow simulated before. If you are doing it when you transfer, it's already not successful. If you don't have in mind right now what you want to leave behind in 3 to 4 months, you are most probably going to have something average left behind. But it's not going to be the best version of what you could have left behind. That's very important. And in the content of what you could leave behind, there are some things that, for me, that are mandatory. The decision log, for example. I'm saying this every episode. I cannot repeat it enough. And there are things which are very contextual. Needs to make sense for you. And for example, um, some cornerstone aspects, some foundational aspects of your architecture, enterprise architecture. If everything is in the product and nothing is modular enough or extendable and things like this, you might get the feedback from your successor that she cannot do much with your system because there are things that shouldn't be in the product, should be in the company, in the information system. I'm talking here about CM, about identity and access management, centralized logs, CRM, lots of stuff in the enterprise architecture. So if you are completely missing that, it's an important chance you are going to miss those aspects. Another aspect which is very important, we've talked in several episodes, it's about data. It's more important today to look at how the data flows in the system, what kind of data you have, data sensitivity, than the code that process that data. They are equally important today, but in time, you will see the shift is happening already. So if you don't know where you have the data, if you don't have data catalog, if you don't know what are your processors, if you struggle to find out what happens in the system, there is an important chance you're doing a bad job. Even if you are where you are, and if you don't have that, you will need to improve, and maybe in several years you will not improve that much, but it still be improved, and there will still be a zero moment where you say this was where I started, and we've improved over that, and the successor can take over it and continue because it has value. It's odd enough. In one session, I said at the beginning of the year that don't code your identity and access management. Use products for that. I found again a new CTO. We are doing due diligence very often. Coded that part. It's very hard to explain why this happens, still happens. And it's also linked with the fact that we don't have a CTO school, and still there is a poor understanding of the leadership of the CTO. And when we are judged about what we've done as a CTO in our mandate, people don't look only to the product; they look at everything that matters for a company. And I think working on the big finger aspects is also very important. So I'm just going to share one of the first slides that I had in this session so that they can look again to the sample of a CTO transfer, and they can start from that. This was a sample. Do you see my screen? Sample of CTO transfer?
Yes, we see it.
So here it's 1 month time box transfer, a mandate of 4 years to deliver all that. Did I answer, sorry?
I believe you did. Yes, thank you. So, going to the next question. What are the most significant challenges you think a CTO will face in the next 5 years, and how can they prepare for them?
In order to think over the 5 years, first of all, we should avoid the decision-making paranoia. You cannot know and foresee what happens in 5 years. But if you cannot know what is the success of your company in 5 years, you can tell what are those things that will make you fail miserably. And if you don't take them into account in 5 years, that's going to hurt. So again, you cannot think of the success, but you can today that there's enough knowledge to say what are the things, knowing your context, that will harm the organization in 5 years if you don't take care of them. So this is the key question, in fact. And then again, it gets to the enterprise architecture. It gets to the social structures. What kind of organization we need to have to support, and we don't regret it in 5 years because an organization changes. And what are the things you should write it in stone? Because, for example, if you say I'm going to have 3 teams of Scrum, that's not something that's worth mentioning for 5 years term. Because an organization should adopt as the environment changes, the business is directed, and things like this. But things like how can developers harm the organizations when they take decisions when they code, that is something that can be very valuable. And if you don't do that, you're going to regret it. I'm getting back to things like data sensitivity. For example, we are not allowed to put in the same database all the data and treat it equally. We need to have different categories and say this is private, this is very private, and this is, or I don't know, very sensible, and this is strategic, and we are not allowed to put them together. That changes the solution architecture. So don't necessarily think about the success because you cannot foresee it, and you have a strategy, and the strategy should help you for the positioning in towards that direction. But think of things that if you don't do them, you will fail miserably. The organization will fail miserably in 4 years, and then you'll discover what matters.
It's actually a really good approach on tackling the unknown. Yeah, it's a very interesting approach. Thank you for that. Another one: how can a CTO leverage partnerships and collaborations with other organizations to strengthen their legacy?
This is so great. So such a powerful question. Because in a sense, we don't admit it that much, but you cannot exist usually today, or it's very hard and expensive as a business alone. You are connected. We just need to admit that. So we might not call them partners, but we have suppliers. We have customers, we have suppliers, and whatever, and special kind of third parties partners. It lands in strategy and tactics. Knowing where you are, in which league you play, this is very important. You have a team of 5 people, or you are 20,000 people. It's gonna change everything. So if you have a small team, you would rather say we cannot develop everything. So one of my first responsibilities of a CTO would be to filter as much as I can. We don't develop that, don't develop that, don't develop that. It's very important. But if you don't develop that and you need it, you need to buy. You need to find partners. So in my opinion, it's an opinion. They are called API companies today. I call them programmable companies. You cannot do a highly successful evolutive company today without partners. You need partners. And you work hand in hand because they can support some of your burden, your financial burden, but they really need to be partners, not you need to work closely with them. And most of the things you do, and I do hope most of the companies do like this, they need to be programmable. So when you have commands in your system, or I don't know, some processes that execute, ensure there is minimum administration over that, so that you can list the processes, so that you can have a catalog of processes, of flows, and things like this. And you can invoke them, you can diagnose them, you can debug them with these and things like this. It lands in something like very similar to service mesh or data mesh. And when you look at all this, it's important, the mesh concept, because you have most of what the entire industry learned, puts it all together. And you can say, I do this myself, and some of this I do with my partners, or some of this I do in a different way. I buy something on the shelf, or so this is very important. And if you have partners, you can also enrich your strategy, because you have secondary products, your APIs. That can also bring some financial health or stability and popularity. If you do that well, you can allow your partners to use that and build new products around it. So I'd say, if you're a CTO and you don't integrate partners in your vision, I find it hard to succeed above the average. And again, it's all about strategy. What are the partners you need? You have the direction. You're taking decisions to position faster towards that direction that you normally do, and partners can help you position faster, go faster in that direction. Now you can also have bad partners, and that's something different, and lose time with them because partnerships are very hard to build. So you cannot do 10 partnerships from the start. Do one and do it great, and then the next one. I've been in many angles of the same problem. I don't know if that was clear, but if there is one thing that you need to take from this, is strategy. Partnerships are strategic choices. Choose one. Don't do too many. It needs to work, and it needs to have lots of opportunities for the future. This partnership.
Yeah, focus your energy, basically.
Yes.
Thank you for answering that, Cornel. One more. How important is mentorship in developing the next generation of technology leaders and shaping a CTO's legacy?
Well, I use a lot, and at Pentalog we use a lot, the Dreyfus Skills Acquisition Model, and it distinguishes between a novice, advanced beginner, and competent, and so forth, proficient, and expert. And based on where you stand as a CTO with your experience, it's an experience model, a model of experience. If you are a novice, mentorship will not help. You need to study, you need training, you need to follow precise rules. If you are already good enough, what good enough means. Your stakeholders are happy. That's one of the most important indicators. Make your stakeholders happy, and that's already something. Think of the future and the legacy, and if you also work on that with baby steps, but you work on it, that's already a good sign. So having a mentor can help. Someone who did that and can show you how to do it. So, for example, you've never done, I don't know, a list of pillars to guide the team and those who interact with it, so that you keep the company safe and increase autonomy. It's an example. If you didn't do that, having someone who did that, it's interesting, but to show you precisely. And you repeat. In that relationship, that person, your mentor, it's much more experienced than yourself in the CTO role. And at one point in time, you are experienced enough, and the mentor cannot help you anymore. The mentorship will not help there. So if you are very experienced, other tools or other relationships can help you, other services. We find this in professional coaching. Professional coaching, the coach is not an expert of what you do, but however can detect what you in how you behave, how you interact, how you react, things that might be toxic, not helping you, might prevent you to reach your goals. And through techniques like myotics, that can be very, very helpful. But CTOs usually, because they are experienced, they are well paid, they consider themselves successful even if it's somewhere in the average what's happening there. Because of that, they would rarely accept help from someone at least who's not an expert in the field. So this is something that I saw. So getting help from a coach, someone who has a background in psychology or anyway, human science, even historians, or I found very interesting people there. So you need to accept the way of thinking about it. And I'm giving an example. There is a strong relationship between CTOs that trust test-driven development. Just to give an example, it's an interesting correlation. And accept coaching. Because test-driven development, it assumes that you are not perfect, you are not reliable, and you need to think of things like what happens after I finish the job, what I try to code. You say there will be this and this and this. You code your test and then you run it. It's something very belief-centric. Something like you can't convince someone to do TDD. It's like religion. But those who think TDD is helpful, when they find the coach, they will leverage that a lot. Those who don't find TDD helpful, they will prefer continue with some sort of mentoring, pairing, and things like this. It's interesting as a relationship. So my answer here is, I believe mentorship is helpful. Not for everyone, not at every stage. It can be money lost, very inefficient and frustrating, depending on where you stand in this maturity, in this model of skills acquisition. If you are somewhere advanced beginner competent, mentorship is still helpful. If not, if you are more than that, seek for coaching. If you are less than that, seek for experts in the field to train you. I hope I answered.
Yeah, the trick here is to see where you fit in, right? Do the evaluation, because it's all about standards. Like the two people you said, they were very pleased with what they found because basically they had no expectations, right? So it's it's very subjective here, but I believe it can be less subjective, and there are models that you have even experience with when ranking, right?
Yeah, so I'm struggling with this part because whatever I do, and I still believe we should think about what's reasonable and what's relative, because and relative is important because technology and what we do, it's very cultural, it's very religious in a sense. It's very hard to find a CTO, PHP CTO, and replace that with Java CTO. It's going to be or a .NET or Microsoft kind of CTO. You'll find it that hard to make a transfer there, and the reason why is because this is not rational. To make it rational, these are complex stochastic systems. So non-deterministic stochastic systems. So I find it very hard to in our groups, in our cultural social groups, we can make things relative. We can, but there are limits to what we say right now. There are limits, but we need to admit that eventually the thing that makes a difference is the economics of what we do, the economy. Is it healthy economy? Is what we do supporting that, consolidating healthy revenue and healthy growth or not? And then there is whatever we do, PHP or .NET, we can have conversations and things become very pragmatic and harsh, but pragmatic. And yeah, so I think it's very hard to answer this question today yet. So I hope I'm not disappointing too much.
For sure not. I think everybody expects a relative or an interpretable way for these kind of answers, which are ultimately answers to generic questions. There is no absolute truth here, and no two companies are alike. So it's very important to filter the questions and find your own answer within an answer, an external one.
Yeah, it recalls me about something very interesting. For example, I don't know if people here are familiar with some of the French writers, but for example, there is an author that I like, André Gide, and there is someone you might have um, heard of, Marcel Proust. It's a very famous author.
Yep.
And André Gide was popular already, but he refused Marcel Proust um, when with his first book. And this is the same. So at one point in time, even the best experts, the best people, the most experienced, they are going to do mistakes. We are human beings, and it's the best CTO is going to do mistakes. And if we compare, sometimes what we consider best today, doing something very different at one point in time might be the success.
Yes, yes, indeed. Okay, so I see there are no more questions on the list. Would you like to add anything else, Cornel, before we wrap this up?
Yes. One last thing. CTO is a privilege. I think I've said it also last time. So we really need to see, whatever the context, we're in, we have tremendous power. Sometimes we lose this power because we didn't know how to hold it, but we have tremendous power. And if we've lost that, maybe at one point we will discuss on how to get that back. But we have tremendous power, and we can change this world. We can make it better. We talk a lot about climate change. We talk about a lot about very important aspects of our future, sustainable development, green IT. All that is not happening, unfortunately. And it's not happening because we are too much into the today's present. And that's good. We are paid for doing the present and things like this. But we have this privilege to change the future, to contribute to the future. We can make it a better world if we think about the future a bit more, and if we learn from things that exist, because this knowledge exists already. We just don't apply it that much. So the minute when we see a feature and it's beautiful, it's working like the charm, and we put it in production, and that's the first version of what we've done, and we know that cannot be efficient enough. Think about that. How can that be more sustainable, more efficient? What would be the right energy to invest now and progressively with time in such questions, so that we don't leave just a better legacy in our company, but also in this world we will have a positive technology impact. Thank you.
Thank you to Cornel for presenting this and for answering the questions. And we'll see each other at the next episode.
Yes, waiting to do that.
Thank you all for attending, and have a great day or evening ahead. Bye.
Bye.